Muslim worlds should, in theory, provide the country with some formidable advantages. So what's going wrong? Why is the country, once called the breadbasket of Europe, today considered to be an economic basket case? Part of the answer may be found in a joke often told Ukraine about the time in early history when God was giving out the lands of the earth to all the different peoples. When Ukraine's turn came up, God gave her one of the best possible locations on the planet. Lands that were replete with natural resources, with black earth so rich that anything could be planted and grow to provide the most bountiful harvest in the world. God gave Ukraine picturesque mountains in the Black Sea, hundreds of rivers and freshwater lakes, and waters and forests abounding with flora and fauna. Ukraine could not believe her luck and said to God, "Thank you, God, for your most generous gift. I don't know what I've done to deserve this. Why is it that I'm so lucky?" "Don't get ahead of yourself," God told Ukraine. "Just wait and see who I give you as neighbors." After centuries of warfare, Ukraine has developed good relations with most of its neighbors, but there is one to the northeast that can't stand to see Ukraine free and is still doing everything in its power to bring Ukraine back under its control. A resurgent Russia, whose leaders are accustomed to rule by force and despotism, do not want to let Ukraine go. The Kremlin continues to insert itself into Ukraine's internal affairs, meddling with its politics and economics. But Moscow's antics are based on lies and deceit. But we can see right through the Kremlin's plan to divert attention away from Russia's own internal problems by serving up pipe dreams of restoring empire. But because they are based on lies, deceit, and oppression, those plans are ultimately doomed to failure. But it wouldn't be fair to blame all of Ukraine's woes solely on the Kremlin. The country's own homegrown problems and internal divisions make the Kremlin's job all the more easier. There's another joke, anecdote in Ukrainian, that sadly illustrates that problem all too well. It's about the Ukrainian Robinson Crusoe, who spent 40 years on an island before being rescued. When the Ukrainian Robinson Crusoe was finally rescued, his rescuers came and saw all that he had built in those 40 years. He showed them his gardens with his beets and tomatoes, the fields of wheat and potatoes, the house he built, and 2 churches on the hill. His rescuers asked him, "Why? Why are there 2 churches?" And Robinson Crusoe answered, "Well, I go to that church, but I never ever go to that one." Why are Ukrainians so divided? Part of the problem is that the country's current political elite has proved to be primarily interested in lining their own pockets. Ukraine's people, meanwhile, have no experience with good government and let the bandits literally get away with murder. Ukraine has attained national statehood, but the people running the country have shown a great level of immaturity when it comes to doing their job. Some would argue that Ukraine and its people are alive and well despite the state and the government, and that Ukrainians and their government are living in parallel worlds. Nevertheless, change is occurring, although it's taking a lot longer than some of us would like. But change in small steps instead of radical leaps forward in the name of progress is the price we may have to pay for choosing the course of peaceful change affected at the ballot box instead of the battlefield. The Orange Revolution was, after all, more Mahatma Gandhi than it was Che Guevara, and when you speak to the elder generation in Ukraine that survived artificial famine and decades of total war, the current political mess is actually a walk in the park. What we condemn as frustrating political chaos is nothing compared to death by starvation, execution, or on the battlefield. That, I think, is truly the big picture. Another part of the big picture, and a victory that is irreversible no matter how hard Ukraine's enemies may try, is that 20 years ago, few people were even aware that a country called Ukraine existed. Today, 18 years after independence, the world knows and recognizes the country called Ukraine. Every time one of the Klitschko brothers steps into the boxing ring to defend their championship belts, or the country's athletes take to the soccer field or win gold at the Olympic Games, the world is reminded of Ukraine. They see Ukraine's blue and yellow flag flying in the sky. The country's artists, musicians, poets, and writers have helped Ukraine gain an international reputation of being the cradle of an ancient civilization and constantly creative culture. Ukraine's president, Viktor Yushchenko, is fond of pointing out that the country declared independence 6 times in the last century and lost it on 5 of those occasions. Those 5 times, 3 times in the wake of World War I and twice during World War II, independence was lost in bloody conflict to mightier foes that quash Ukrainians' bids for freedom through terror and brute force. Our most recent bid for independence is now 18 years in the making. You need only to travel to Ukraine and speak with the young people to see that the country is here to stay. When Ukrainians go to the polls early next year to elect their president, they will include first-time voters who were born after the USSR collapsed 18 years ago and whose lives have been completely lived in an independent Ukraine. Perhaps it is up to that generation to realize the dream of making Ukraine a top 10 best country in the world to live in. They will be able to draw on generations of experience and commitment to freedom to make the country prosperous. And we, in the diaspora, should be there to help them make the changes. Ukraine, in turn, will help us in the West to sustain our communities and perform our roles as the country's ambassadors at large. We can only thank God for the opportunities afforded us and pray for strength and wisdom as we carry forward. May the winds of change that began blowing 18 years ago keep Ukraine's sails filled as the country navigates the course towards a mature nation statehood. God bless America, and God bless Ukraine.